Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. I'm Dan Reus. We're getting kicked off here a little bit late. We're having a roundtable talking about pet tech as a startup opportunity. And I'm putting up, I've shown a visual of a thing that the Pet Care Innovation Prize and Pet Care Innovation Network did this summer, just showing it's about 130 startups doing exciting things in pet care. And I just wanted to kind of put that out there to say that there's startups all over the place doing some really interesting things. You're going to get to meet some cool people from several of those startups. I'm going to put a link to that article in the piece. But I helped start the Pet Care Innovation Prize, and I work in pet tech, and I'm also an managing editor at large at EQ. And we're excited to kind of talk about the pet care startup. And I was hoping that we could just kind of go around. We have some cool founders in here, and I'd like to start with Hilary. Hilary, are you, tell us a little bit about Obi and where you're at. And, you and I know each other well, but you've had a couple of interesting pivots. You also have some, even though you're based in the Bay Area, you have some important St. Louis connections. So can you just tell us in a minute or so kind of what Obi is about and how you got to where you are?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So, hi, I'm Hilary Jensen. I'm the founder of Obi, and Obi is a digital pet wellness company. We've started by focusing on dogs. And the reason is because typically dog owners spend more money on their pets, but I think that's changing gradually. We started off as a smart bowl kind of hardware company. And over time, with our release of our product, we learned that pet owners really want insight into their pets and a better understanding of how to feed them. And so since so much of eating and drinking behavior is an indicator of health and happiness, we thought we would be more of a convenience tool, and now we are more of a health insights tool, and then also launching personalized consumables around possibly food, but also like probiotics and different vitamins.
So, Hilary, you started out as an IoT device with a connected app to make it so that feeding time went better. But now what you're saying is you're moving much more into being a whole health company for pet. Is that correct?
Yeah. And I think we didn't realize the power of the data that we were collecting, which is the whole reason we launched the product anyway. That's the power of IoT, is being able to have real-time understanding of behavior, at least from our product standpoint. And so we learned through the Pet Care Innovation Prize, was introduced to the team at Purina, learned what kind of data the industry lacks, meaning they have very little visibility into the home, have learned that veterinarians are the same way. And so we are really a window into the home for pet parents and for the industry.
Great. Well, that kind of tees up. Dave, can you talk a little bit? So Dave is entrepreneur in residence at the Pet Care Innovation Network, which runs the Pet Care Innovation Prize. But you're also a founder of a pet tech startup that you exited, and that you had an exit, a sale. So can you talk a little bit about your journey to being here? And you're joining us actually from DC. So we actually have both coasts. Even though they have strong St. Louis DNA, we have both coasts represented here. Dave, you want to talk a little bit about yourself? And we're not going to hold anything last week. You're not responsible for anything last week. I understand.
So yeah, happy to be here. And yes, like Dan mentioned, I was founder of a company called Barkley Pets. We started in Washington, D.C. in 2015, very much like Hilary's story, thinking that we were going to launch a convenience sort of services platform to give pet owners, busy pet owners, which there are a lot of in Washington, D.C., an easy option to book pet care, both on demand and recurring, specifically with dog walking. Thinking that, this is right when like the Uber for X model was very popular kind of across the board. And naively, my co-founder and I thought that the Uber for dog walking model potentially worked, but we were completely wrong. Quickly realized we were wrong, and ultimately geared the business entirely to support the dedicated service professionals that care for our dogs. So we abandoned the Uber for dog walking model, built a platform that really allowed for the pet owners to connect in ongoing sort of long lasting relationships with dog walkers. We realized that what we were really doing was creating relationships and fostering those relationships. Our walkers would, typically walk for the same dogs every single day. And that created a lot more trust, stronger bonds, more security, and just generally happier dogs. It does take a village to raise a pet, and dog walkers for many families are extensions of the families. The dogs typically are, I know my dog is happier to see my dog walker than she is to see me most of the time. And so, like Hilary said, kind of being the visibility into the home, we were to this day, Barkley remains kind of one of the few service providers that has access to the home and is trusted by pet owners and by the dogs to enter the home and care for the pet when the owner's not available. So that's Barkley. Like Dan said, we did have an exit. We sold earlier this year, and since then I've joined the Pet Care Innovation Network and Prize to get to work with all of the companies that are part of the network and all of the companies out there that want to be part of the network through the Prize. And it's been eye-opening. As a founder, you typically have blinders on. You're only focused on really your own business and everything that's going on in your business. And there's just so much happening in the pet industry. And this experience has certainly been rewarding so far to get to work with founders across the entire scope of the industry.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. We'll get to some questions here. By the way, for panelists, I think everybody heard we had some technical issues earlier. I've resolved it. You can now turn your camera on, I believe. So if you want to, so we can see what you look like. But hey, Quentin, and you're up next. We're waiting for Sterling to join us, but while we wait for Sterling, you're from Kansas City. I got to meet you this year as part of that opportunity mapping kind of activity that we talked about. But tell us a little bit about your background. So you have more of a technology background moving into pets. So talk a little bit about how you got to Paw Connects and what's going on with Paw Connects. Whoops, you're muted.
How about now? There we go.
There you go.
Yeah, so my background is in technology, specifically speaking towards cybersecurity, and which is definitely embedded in our app. I'm the founder of an app called Paw Connects, and we are a social community app designed to embrace the natural interactions that happen at dog parks, helping our dogs and dog parents to meet, connect, and play. And we utilize things that have been said already between Hilary and Dave. We try to foster the inside looks of the parenting home. We want our users to build a personal pack with the people that they meet at dog parks. But unlike many other apps, we don't use internet or GPS. We use strictly Bluetooth. So all users are within a specific range. So there's that natural interaction. And while using your pack, you're able to leverage some inside sharing information, find out who your trusted members, people that you interact with, what dog walkers they're using, what vets they're using, and this is all versus going on Google or any other search engine to get just a plethora of mixed up data that doesn't really give you an insight. I'd rather hear it about from my trusted pack rather than some randos on the internet.
Cool. Well, we'll get started. I put together some kind of discussion starting questions, but my hope is that this can be kind of an informal and back and forth kind of thing. So certainly not expecting any one of you to be an expert in these areas and nobody else to know anything about it. But let's just kind of get started. Like, what is the pet care space like? So Dave, talk about it a little bit as like, what were you doing before you became a founder? Talk a little bit about the founder experience and what you see. You kind of alluded to this in your intro, that you see a lot of founders. What's it like for a founder in this space? Are these former investment bankers that have lots of access to capital, or are they passionate people that love their Yorkie, or some combination in between? Talk a little bit about what the founder looks like and what it feels like to be a founder.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really interesting question, because it's a little bit all over the place, and I think that's the beauty of the pet care industry specifically. You don't have to have a deep background in cybersecurity like maybe Quinton to get into the pet care industry, but you would if you wanted to go into sort of the cybersecurity space with a startup or something like that. Same with fintech and all these things. You have to have those deep expertise. With the pet industry, like, all you have to be doing is you have to be pretty entrepreneurial. You have to love your pet, right? And how many of us just sit around, walking our dogs, hanging out with our cats, and thinking, gosh, there's an opportunity here for whatever it is that you're focused on. Before I became a founder, I worked in the government here in Washington, D.C. for about 7 years in the Defense Department, doing absolutely nothing related to certainly dog walking or anything in the pet industry. And, it was just one day, my co-founder and I at Barkley were like, wouldn't it be great if we could tap a button and get a dog walker? And 5 months later, we had our beta app out, and we're taking the first walks on the platform. So I think from a founder makeup, it really runs the whole gamut. There's a lot of interesting folks from a lot of different backgrounds doing different things. And I think that speaks to the size of the industry and the scope of it.
It's interesting, but also because of, in your case, the hyper local nature of it too, it also allows you to start an MVP that's really kind of a localized MVP. You don't have to have an MVP that scales all the way across the country or world. Oh
yeah, I mean, like, it was Google calendars and text messages.
That's awesome. Hilary, can you talk a little bit more? I mean, you've worked in Cincinnati with the brand accelerator there. You've been in St. Louis with both Capital Innovators and obviously won the prize, and as well as worked with Arch Grants. But this journey to kind of figuring out the space, that it's not just the hardware, but it's much bigger than that. It's much bigger. The opportunity is much bigger, but also that, how it all works. So can you talk a little bit about kind of your pivoting journey to where you are?
Yeah, sure. And I think it's interesting because a little bit counter to being able to quickly launch an MVP, hardware, as they say, is hard. And not that building a company isn't, but at the same time, it took us 4 years to iterate and then finally launch our, what I would still call is an MVP. And part of it had to do with really my background is in software and not hardware, and so was learning the hardware industry. But that love for pets and the the passion, and then the fact that IoT is, or was at least 5 years ago, very new. It didn't matter that I didn't know, it wasn't an expert in IoT because it was still new. And now I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but trial by fire sure does teach you a lot. When I had gone to a couple of accelerators, one, and the Brandery in Cincinnati, had a great experience there, had a lot of help, forming our brand and creating the marketing strategy for OB. And that was, I think, that was after I had won the Pet Care Innovation Prize. I'm not, can't keep it all straight, but I think what I learned the most from was through the Pet Care Innovation Network, and also working with just even the week of working with Purina, got a lot of insight and understanding that I didn't have in the pet industry, that I probably wouldn't have gotten so quickly, and an understanding of just how, I mean, I had no idea that there were $20 billion companies like Purina that had so many different brands. And, I really felt like it was more of a cottage industry, which is, I think, naive, is considering that Purina and Mars are so huge. But that opened my eyes to understanding the opportunity more, and also to understanding how big, and like you said, um, this is really global. So we launched globally, or tried to. That was a really bad idea, and then scaled back, and now we're just focused on the U.S. And I think, based on the customer feedback that we have gotten, we're working on our version 2, and also working on different aspects of the health and wellness area for the pet. I don't know if I'm answering your question enough, Dan.
That's great. Actually, sorry, I was just well, I had you muted because I was dealing with a thing with getting Sterling into the room. But yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I think that what you point out is some really exciting things about the space, that it is possible for a founder, a startup in this space, to navigate it. And, as you said, hardware, as you said earlier, hardware is hard. And everybody is discovering that. But the pet companies are kind of figuring that out. I want to introduce somebody that's late to join us, but it's not probably because of his fault. But Sterling, you and I have not met face to face, but you're doing some really cool stuff with Tabby and Dig, and I just want to kind of introduce another aspect to what everybody is doing here. So what we've got is, we've got Dave, who had an exit in a walking company, and Quentin, who's got a startup that's doing connection at dog parks, Hilary, who's got an IoT play called Obi. But you're with Dig and Tabby, and you are the dating apps for dog and cat lovers. And I was just wondering if you could briefly, everybody's, give just like a few sentences about what your role is with those companies and what those companies are doing.
Yeah, y'all can hear me pretty well. Hey, how y'all doing? My name is Sterling Trap King Davis. I go by Trap King because I started a nonprofit called Trap King Humane Cat Solutions that focuses on cat rescue. So it's TNR, Trap Neuter Return. So being in rescue, having my own nonprofit, I got with Dig and Tabby, because being a cat man, it's already weird enough. It's hard to go out and date. There was an article in People magazine that said women are more likely to swipe left if they see a guy holding a cat in his profile picture. So we got together instantly with that to create Tabby, which is a dating app for cat lovers. So you knock that aspect out of the way when you already know this person loves cats, because I've had dates where women have come in and been like, "Oh my God, what is that? Like, what, are you gonna let that cat sleep with you?" So that's what Tabby and Dig are. Dating apps. Dig is for the dog lovers, Tabby is for the cat lovers, and I handle a lot of the nonprofit and rescue integration.
So we've just been kind of getting going here, and sorry for any technical issues you had with joining that were as a result of me, but we are.
It may have been my fault. It may have been my fault, so it's fine.
Yeah, that's cool. So talk a little bit about, like dating apps, so like, is this like an incredibly niche kind of thing? Like, so you play in this space, and you guys actually play in an interesting space, because, a lot of people think a dating app, either it's like, like you said, Tinder or something where you're going to want to continue to use it to hook up, or they think it's a dating app that once you find your forever person, then you stop doing it. So like, talk a little bit about how the dating thing and the pet thing are not really as niche as people believe, and why that's bigger than maybe anybody knows.
Yeah, it's a lot bigger than just a regular dating app, because like you said, I mean, on Tinder or any other dating app, you're hoping to meet up with somebody and the site not be useful or the app not be useful anymore, so you move on. With Tabby, one of the things that's amazing with that is that cat people aren't usually people. So it's not just a place to go and find love and relationships, but it's also a place where we have a thing called Cat Treat. It's basically like Instagram for cats, where you could scroll up, you could share pictures. If you have a cat, everybody that has cats love to share pictures of their cats. Look at Floofy, look at Floofy. Oh my God, look at this picture of Floofy. So you have a cat tree where you can go in there and just meet people, meet their animals. You don't have to necessarily date. And this helps where I come in at with rescue. So the app can also be used for things like adoption. In cat rescue, you could probably meet and link up with somebody that's rescuing cats around the corner from you that you didn't even know about. So it helps in a lot of other ways, to where it's not something where, okay, we just found love, I found my person, now I'm out of here, I don't need this anymore. This is something that you could still use to help with adoptions, to help with fostering, TNR rescue, and a lot of different ways on top of finding love.
And so that's kind of community, like that's all getting people engaged and things. And so I'm imagining that's also finding volunteers, or getting people engaged, not just looking at pictures, doing the doom scroll, looking through pictures, looking for something that finally makes us stop worrying about the state of the world or whatever.
Right. It helps me
wondering,
out too, because a lot of what I want to do is to get more men engaged in things like cat rescue. It's usually looked at something as something guys don't do as much, especially being a man of color, a black man. That's really something that's rare. So it's also, Tabby is another fun way to get more people engaged in that as well too. Hopefully to get different demographics into rescue and just in the cats period.
So I was wondering if all of you guys could, Hilary's a woman, so we've noticed that actually pet tech is a place that women have done some really strong companies. So we've met a lot of really strong founding women. Dave is part of the PCIN. We didn't start out with that as a mandate. Obviously, we care about diversity, but we realized that without even trying, that well over half the companies that we had in the network had at least one woman as a founder. And also, we're starting to notice that pet ownership is actually growing faster amongst the Latino and Latina community, and Asian American and African American community. And there are some things that, some historical things that are some pressure against that. But talk a little bit about, is pet care really diverse, or, is it just, suburban people, in their SUVs with pets? Guys, talk a little bit about the diversity of both the pet founders and the pet industry and the pet parents. If you would take a turn. Maybe Dave, would you start? Or Sterling? I don't care who.
Go ahead, Sterling.
Go ahead.
One of the things that I work on is diversity in animal rescue. Like, a lot of reasons that I got started and what I'm doing is because I didn't see a lot of diversity. So I think we're getting there. I think as we go on, but normally what I've seen is mainly just a bunch of compassionate women that's involved and engaged more. Like, I think we're starting to see now, especially with the pandemic, I think, like you said, we see more adopters, more people wanting cats. And I know that, or just pets, period. And I know that's coming from what we're going through now. A lot of people sitting at home like, hey, let me get a companion. But I do gradually now, as we go on, from things that happened this year too. I actually think things that happened this year is actually going to help create and build that diversity.
Dave, I'm going to pitch to you. Oh, go ahead, Hilary.
Well, I think in general, I think, there are so many people who think of founders as like, recent graduates from Stanford or something like that. And so I feel like at least in the pet industry, there are a lot of passionate people who have seen problems that they want to solve. And because they're so passionate, they have started a company. That said, I think the diversity still lacks in the investment community. It is still very white male, and that causes its own challenges, I think, from a diversity standpoint, especially when it comes to investments.
That's where I come in at.
Yeah. Well, and Dave,
Are you an investor?
Soon.
Yeah.
All right. When you exit, Sterling, you give me a call.
Yeah, there we go.
I love that.
Hey, and we just want a small cut of that deal. Okay, that's all. That's all we want.
Say it happened here. It happened here.
Hey, I just wanted to add, I can't speak towards diversity of the founders or startups, but what I can speak towards is as Sterling was getting to, the diversity of the pet parents. And that's where Comiskey comes into play. If you go to dog parks, you're seeing women, men, people of color, whites, black. There's no limitation to what you see. Unfortunately, what the only big social barrier is how do you exchange the contact information? And what we're trying to do with Comiskey is lower that social barrier and create ways to exchange digital profiles without embracing on your Facebook life or your Instagram life. We keep that separate because that has your political views, your personal views, things that shouldn't be shared at the dog park. We're at the dog park. We simply want to speak about the reason why we're here, which is about our animals. And that's what we should connect on. So that's where we come into play. So the diversity out there as far as dog parenting is there. I don't know if it's there as far as investor, as Hilary was saying. But it's definitely there as far as who's owning pets. So there better be some diversity as far as who's investing in pet startups.
Well, I do want to, Dave, maybe if you would address that, you just did a session for the PCIN on helping them match with investors and stuff. And, you've tried to raise money before too.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think especially, if you are of color or a minority in pet tech, it's already hard because people think, they don't invest as much in people that don't look like they just came out of Stanford or Harvard. But also, there's there's a lack of understanding of pet by investors. Can you talk a little bit about what you are seeing in that space? Like, how do you get that level of engagement? Because I think it's fair to say that pet tech, people, do face some barriers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's just way more complicated than it needs to be, I think. And I completely agree with what everyone has said so far. First, on Quentin's point, yes, pet owners, absolutely, super diverse, right? But to Hilary's point, it's getting funding as a female founder is hard enough because there just aren't that many female investors, right? And then add diversity and race to it. It's just it's a real mess. And I don't think anybody's addressing it as much as they could be right now. I think, we raised some money for Barkley, but it was 1/300th of what our largest competitors raised. And
wow.
And even that was hard. And, we had really good traction. I think that there's a lot of learning that the investor space has to do around the pet industry. And I think I'm starting to see investors with more of a dedicated approach. We're intentionally investing in minority founded companies. We're intentionally invested in women founded companies and things like that. And that's great. But, Dan, we did have that investor founder network event just a couple of weeks ago. And, if you looked around the Zoom, it wasn't very diverse at all. Really, and that was pretty disappointing, I think. On my end, it's just I'm getting frustrated by it. If you can't tell, I'm a little bit flustered right now.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, but one of the things about pet is that, if you're following the idea of the alternative protein space, so all these people that are creating, ethically sourced proteins and things and there's a group of people and investors doing deals in that space that are oh, pet is kind of an interesting thing in that space. And then you see some areas where investors are starting to move into pet. But I think it is really important to know that it will be hard to raise it's going to be challenging to raise funding as a startup in pet. And so not to depend on the fact that like there's going to be some like, you know, that you've seen on TechCrunch that all these people in the Valley have an idea and they get $10 million and they start running with it. That's not how it works. Before we move on from diversity, we had over the summer that we did an event, and there was a guy named Brian Taylor who calls himself the dog father of Harlem. And he has dog services business or pet services businesses in Harlem, and they've served well over 100,000 pets. And one of the things that was really interesting that he said is part of how to succeed in diversity in pet care is you have to understand that what is interesting to a diverse audience is maybe not the same thing as you. He says, I'm tired of seeing pictures of what looks like great dog grooming to a white person from Westchester. That is not what looks like a great grooming job to somebody in Harlem. You know, you have to figure out how to position these kinds of things and what's of value. He said that people in all kinds of neighborhoods are spending money, but you have to know how to really engage them. But the same thing that that appeals to a suburban family in Cincinnati is not the same thing that appeals to a suburban, to an Oakland family or to wherever. And I was wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about what you've seen as kind of the range of how you engage with diverse audiences in pet. So his example was around grooming. A great grooming job to you, that is not a great grooming job. That's actually something horrible to have on your Instagram feed to like indicate that you have a good service.
I do that. I deal with that. A lot of that, again, is what Trap King is. Trap King Humane Cat Solutions. If you look in the Urban Dictionary, Trap King, the terms Trap King and Trap Queen is kind of derogatory in the Black community. It hasn't always been a positive thing. And now a lot of people in the Black community use it as how they call their job. I'm the Trap King of stocking at Walmart, or I'm the Trap Queen of driving these buses or whatever. They use it as like a king or queen title that's celebrated. So I use that term to engage different demographics. Like what you were saying, I mean, to some demographics, this may not be as entertaining or eye-catching, but when you like TNR and cat rescue, it's looked at as a tedious thing. It's looked at as you think of compassion fatigue, burnout, you think of sad, hurtful things. What I do is try to make it look like a rock star type of deal. It's just if you're a man and you doing this, you're a Trap King. If you're a woman, you doing it, you're a Trap Queen. So I think that's real important, is to, just like with Tiger Woods or Venus and Serena, a lot of people didn't know certain demographics would have never thought about, hey, I'm gonna put my child to play golf, until you saw this guy do it. So I think in a lot of ways you have to do things to appeal to different demographics. And I think in the pet industry, we haven't, as big as it is, it's still kind of small and exclusive in a lot of ways. So I think broadening out, reaching out to different demographics, you do have to do things differently. And that's something that, and I actually know Brian too, the dog father of Harlem. That's a friend of mine. We've spoke a few times. So I definitely agree with what he's saying with that.
Hilary, can you talk a little bit, because, one of the first use cases for Obi was this idea of, in a household, who's actually fed the pet, like make sure the pet doesn't get fed 3 times in one day, or in three times in one morning. But can you talk a little bit about also like do you have any insights in like the household dynamics of multiple caregivers? Because I think that's one of the other things about pets, is that it's not a one-to-one relationship that stays the same over time. And Dave, maybe you could touch on this too, that lots of people that get involved in and what does that look like as an opportunity in pet tech to help kind of coordinate what can be kind of confusing. Can you talk to that a little bit, Hilary?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Currently, we're still limited by one bowl to one dog, and there are multiple dogs usually in a household, or not usually, often in a household. And I can't speak to cats, but I think it's common to have multiple cats as well. And like I've forgotten who said it. Dog walkers are an intimate part of the family, just like and have equal responsibility, if not more active responsibility, for the pets, like on a day-to-day basis. Often, I think in the pre-COVID world, And now that everyone's home, things are changing a little bit. I think it'll probably go back to normal. But meaning that that people will still be coming into the house, and I think that's getting back to normal. But how to communicate among all family members, including the dog walker, that the pet has been fed, was a challenge that we addressed via hardware. Meaning you don't have to have the app. You can look at our bowl, and it has light signals to let you know. So you press the button, it says ready's been fed. If not, green, go ahead. Because we knew that not everyone would want to install an app, or you wouldn't be able to rely on that. So that's one simple way that we incorporated the fact that not everyone's going to have the app. But now we are looking into, I think, and I love some of the ideas about the cat tree Trap King is doing. So I'm gonna have to check you guys out, because it really is a social aspect too, to showing off how cute your pet is. Like the number of pet parents who just melt the minute you say that their pet is cute. Like, and the wet pet isn't cute, right? But at the same time, it's just like
we even try to do the feline crush
it.
Friday.
Oh, nice.
And
like a feline crush Friday, where you talk about your crush for the cat, not necessarily the person, but you may have a crush on somebody's cat, so it's feline crush Friday. So yeah,
there you go.
That's fun.
All types of stuff.
And
I love it. And then about
ahead.
the diversity too, it cracks me up. Like, there'll be these like I have a pit bull, for example, and my investors will be like, what? They expect me to have like this little teeny white poodle or something. And then but yeah, and people have these, and it is true too. Like I hadn't met a lot of guys who have cats, but there are more and more that we're working into OB as well, just because they keep asking for it. So I love it.
One of the, just to back on like the feeding and like the shared family responsibilities that you talked about, Hilary, like one of the largest feature requests we consistently received with Barkley, and we never got around to it when I was still there, was family accounts, right? Like you download the app, you create an account, you're responsible for your dog's account. But couples and families, like they all wanted the post-walk information. They wanted a cute photo of their dog from the walk and things like that. And so I think that sharing responsibility sort of aspect is actually super important in this industry, and really unique to this industry as opposed to any others.
I met a founder, and then Quentin, I would like to get your take on that, because with your cybersecurity background, and as you've been talking about this kind of dog park experience, it's like this it's not just a local kind of social network, but it's also based on only when they're together, which I think is kind of intriguing. But, we've run into a couple, on that opportunity map, you'll see that there's a couple of startups in there that are, unfortunately, vet care, can be a barrier to pet ownership. And there's some research that shows that doesn't take a very large unexpected vet bill to make it so that somebody surrenders or has to, they call that economic euthanasia, when somebody puts down a pet just because they can't afford the care that they need for what they have going on. But you do see, so like a lot of people are familiar with the idea of care circles around a human, that, everybody rallies around somebody that's going through chemo or whatever, but an idea of a care circle around a pet is kind of interesting. And that can be a care circle that is is an evergreen, that's 365 days a year. That's not based on their health. That's based on who's going to go clean out the litter box, or who's going to go make sure that they get their, drops, or, get played with so that they don't trash the house. But Quentin, could you talk a little bit about, I think what you're doing is kind of interesting, and obviously you're earlier along than most of the people here. What have you seen, and kind of what's your path that you're envisioning to take advantage of this? Whoops, you're muted.
Dang it. Sorry. Absolutely. As I hear everyone talks, I'm thinking about ways that we can integrate. And as I continue to push, we are focused on building personal packs. So these are packs of people that serve a purpose in your dog parenting journey. So if, as Sterling had mentioned, as you're looking for a groomer, instead of finding a groomer online that they may have a design that isn't specific for your culture or your personal value, you can reach out to a pack member, someone that serves a purpose on your dog parenting journey, to find out who is their dog groomer. And now you're getting a personal review of someone that has physically used that groomer. And therefore now when you go pick that groomer, you're not going in as a risk to think, oh, they may come back and turn my wolf dog into a deer where they cut off all his fur. So that's where we believe that we can really help the different cultures and values of people, because you're building a personal pack for yourself. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, that's great. So so now I think
Can I interject? That's super.
Go ahead,
really
Hilary.
that really resonates with me, and I don't think I articulated it well. But so much of what we're helping people do with individualized nutrition is gain an understanding of what they're feeding their pet and using their personal preferences to shape that as well. And it's often not necessarily budget, because people will spend a ton of money on their pet's food, especially, but it may be sustainability, it may be it's allergies or GI issues. And if you have a trusted source or a friend in a network, you're more likely to switch to that food that they recommend. And people are less trusting too of their vets, because of their vets' recommendations, because they also make money off of their recommendations. So I'm going to take a look at all of your networking parts. I love it. It really gives me some ideas about how to help our customers.
Absolutely. And that's where we're going. And Dan, I know you asked about what our future roadmap is. That's what we're doing. We want to help users use their pack as well as the Paw Connects community to make decisions. On the app coming here, we're going to launch it here in December. There's going to be a feature where if you're looking for a dog walker, dog groomer, any dog service, when you on the app, that service provider will appear and you will be able to see how many users of your pack have selected that service provider. So there's your trust factor. People that I trust the service provider A, and then it will also showcase how many users of the Paw Connects app have chosen that provider. So although those may not be in your pack, that does showcase their reputation. So therefore you have trust and reputation to factor in your decisions, which happen to be the two most valued decisions the two most valued criteria when making a decision. So as Hilary talks about dog food, we eventually want to get to the point where if you are Nestle Purina, on your product, you have a scanner, or if you scan it with the Paw Connects app, it'll show you how many dogs like your dog, how many dog parents like that have a dog like you, and I have a German Shepherd. So it would show how many German Shepherds have purchased this product. If it comes up and it's 0, chances are I'm not going to buy that product. And although I've never heard of it, and although Purina is a very well reputable company, if other German Shepherds haven't picked it, I'm gonna find a different product. And if that product does have, across the world, let's just say 10,000 German Shepherds have bought it and they've given it 5 stars, that's the product I'm going to purchase. So if you're not on the app, if you're not one of our partners, and a user doesn't get information from you by using our app, then chances are you're going to miss out on a sale versus a competitor that is using our app. But that's where we're going.
That's really interesting. I want to start wrapping up here, but what we're talking about is the idea of trust and technology, and Dave, I'm going to ask you to kind of so let's just leave with some closing thoughts for potential entrepreneurs or wannapreneurs in the space. But, there's an author, Rachel Botsman, that actually talks a lot about trust. And, one of the things that Barkley addressed was the fact that some of the gig economy dog walking apps, you had no idea how much you could really trust the owner. And there's this pet is this space where trust is really important, because the pet can't tell you that didn't work out. So you have to have a higher level of trust than you normally would for other apps. But if each of you would take a chance to just say, what's a few sentences of advice for founders in the space that are how to balance this, entrepreneurship, trust, and technology, and moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, we could do an entire.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
We could do an entire session, I think, on just that one. Like that would take to really address that question. You're talking about an hour plus conversation, probably. To your specific question, Dan, about like what advice to other entrepreneurs or folks that want to get in the space potentially with the company. We made a decision really early on with Barkley because I think there's a lot of, when you look at across the startup ecosystem in the pet space, there's a lot of brands that play to the very cute element of pets. And they're brands that are cutesy, fun, plenty of dog puns and plenty of things like that. And we internally sat down as a leadership team at Barkley and said, how do we want to communicate to our audience? What is the most important thing that we need to communicate to our audience? And the first thing that came up was trust and safety. And we didn't see a way to do that while playing to the cutesy element of pet brands. So we just abandoned it entirely and said, like, no, the way we will position our brand will be trust and safety first, dog puns later. And my advice would be decide how important trust is for whatever your potential company is, and make that front and center of your messaging.
Great. Sterling, would you talk a little bit about that kind of between ambition and trust and tech as, for pet techs?
Well, yeah, and I want to bring up with Tabby, like, I think it's like just what Dave said. I mean, you got to really go in knowing how you want to communicate with your audience, with your supporters. And one of the things with Tabby that we did that I was completely on board with and pushing to make sure that we did before, when we launched it on August 8th, which is International Cat Day, of course, that's when we got to launch that. But when we launched it, everything was just open up and free because we wanted to focus on the bugs. And there's a lot of things as far as dating apps that child trafficking and things to that nature going on. And even one of my own pictures was rejected because I had a picture with me laying there with some cats on the couch, and it was a picture of a friend of mine's. Her niece was in a picture on the wall, and they rejected my picture because of that child, because people use dating websites in different ways for child trafficking. And I thought I was like, why in the world did my picture get rejected? I'm one of the people that made the app happen. What in the world is this? Yeah. But it's big because that we focusing on trust. We focusing on safety. We letting people know right now, yeah, it is that serious on the app. If it's a picture of a child up on the wall, we're going to ask you about that child, who that is. So we decided at that point that trust and safety versus a lot of apps where, I don't want to knock any other dating apps, but it's a lot of ways around and a lot of things you could do. You can sneak some dirty stuff in there, but we decided early on that we were going to focus on safety and trust because we got a lot of compassionate cat people, so they don't want to go into some crazy stuff popping up in their feed. So yeah, I would say if I was to advise anything, that would definitely be it. Go with make sure, like Dave said, make sure you know how you want to communicate, and I would put safety and trust up at the top for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Just having a clear message and delivering and making sure that users can trust that you are delivering on that clear message. One of our messages is your personal and trusted source for all dog parenting advice and support. And as long as we can show the logistics of how you can trust and provide support, I think our users trust that using our app is where I'm going to easily find the right information that is personal for me.
I'm gonna have to check y'all out too now. That's serious. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Yeah, we're only on iPhone right now. We are app, as Hilary said. The adoption has been difficult, but yeah, we're on iPhone now. We got Android dropping around the end of November, but we're gonna do our big marketing blast next year once things get warmed up again.
Right. Once things go back to normal. But I know about iPhone too. We had our things getting with Apple too. So yeah.
Android's coming.
Hey, Hilary, would you add any last comments? Would you add anything to this?
I think I love what everyone said. For me, it is just continuing to talk to your customers and understanding that they won't be able to tell you what to create, but that you do need to hear what they value. And trust is definitely part of that. And love is, the other. It's just so much about unconditional love. And so how to support that either in your voice, but then also in the product that you're creating.
I think that's really important. A lot of people, as I'm looking at you guys and everything, a lot of people, make assumptions because, oh, you've got a corgi, or, oh, you have a Persian or whatever, that means that they understand so much about you. And really, it's just the starting point to dive in to learn more about somebody to build a relationship, because why they have a Persian or why they have, whatever they have is not, we can't stereotype them, and that plays to the diversity, and that also plays to the trust issues, because we have to be closer to people to really understand them.
Right.
So we're going to wrap up here because there's a lot of other great things going on. EQ is turning this conversation into a bit of an article, so you'll see a little bit more about this, and hopefully get to see some links back to some great folks in the space. But thank you so much to Quentin and Sterling, Hilary, and Dave for joining us. I encourage you, I put in the chat a link to that Pet Care Startup Opportunity Map that's on the Pet Care Innovation Prizes website, but you can find that just by going to petcareinnovation.com. I'm sorry, that's not it. Pet Care, what is the website, Dave?
Petcareinnovation.net.
Right? I was like, yeah. But sorry about that. But and Hilary and Quentin and Sterling, and you guys are all doing great stuff. Thanks for sharing it with the community. I really excited to see what happens in the next year as we see some cool startups, and we really can't wait to hear even great things, more great things happening for Obi and Paw Connects and Tabby. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Take care, everybody.
Thank you guys.
Thanks again.
Really
Thank
great
you.
meeting you. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.